Okay, let's start with port 9. So we have seen various sources of maps in the previous slides. So in the previous slide we saw various sources. So one source was like the Russian army map. Another source was the like the NASA thermal kind of data that shows the topology of the terrain. So with the same global mapper tool now, we also saw that we were able to kind of georeference the maps. I mean, we got a georeference map that we basically imported in this tool to know the exact location. So if you have different sources and we know the exact location of the different sources, with this tool again you can put layers, I mean maps on top of each other's. So you can basically overlay maps with transparency. Like in this case, I kind of overlaid the Russian army maps with 50% transparency over the NASA data, and here you can kind of clearly see that I mean the NASA data, the colors here, like say these green valleys, these are all generated by satellite sensing technology. So those are like, you could say, 100% accurate. That it's kind of corresponds very, I mean the Russian army map, which shows the streams, you can clearly see that the streams are kind of more or less perfectly matching with a little bit of error here onto these satellite generated topo maps. So you can really see that, I mean, the Russians did a pretty good time in the old days to kind of clearly identify the location of the peaks here, right? You see the highest peaks all correspond to these darkest red areas, which basically means the satellite data is matching with the century-old handwork from the Russians, basically. So combining different maps with different transparency levels can allow you to generate your own maps, create your own maps with even additional detail. Okay, so that's one more. But again, before you can overlay, obviously you need to georeference your map so that they are put in the proper position on top of each other. The next one, let's talk about GPS now. Okay, so now let's talk a little about GPS systems. GPS stands for Global Positioning System. It's basically, I mean, satellites which have been put up in space originally for, I mean, by the US, the Department of Defense, for kind of defense for the army purposes. But those guys were so nice actually to also allow civilians to kind of make use of this satellite network for location services, because I mean basically we are talking about identifying accurate positions all across the surface of the Earth, which is like a pretty useful useful technology. I mean useful in various civilian purposes also. So the Department of Defense has actually launched, if you go to the next slides first, many satellites throughout the time. I think they started somewhere in 1978. They had several blocks of launches. Like the first launch, which has 10 satellites, then another 19. So recently they launched, I mean this is actually even a plan it seems, so recently in 2005 to 2009, the last 4 years, they launched some 8 satellites again. And so the current, I mean what's currently up there is a combination of these different historical launches. So currently I think we have 30 satellites which are still operational, because sometimes there is like a failure during launching or a failure after the launching over time. So as of now we have 30 satellites, 7 from the most recent launch, the IIRM, 12 from the previous launch, and 11 from the launch before that. Satellites, the 19 originally launched satellites are not in service anymore actually. I guess they are like older technology, maybe these are like higher precision. So overall, you kind of have these 30 satellites all over the globe. Obviously, depending on your location on the globe, you will not obviously see all the satellites, right? Because there will be some satellites which are down the horizon. So normally, on an average, you will see somewhere between 8 to 12 satellites maximum. If you're in the plains, I mean, if you're kind of in the plains, then depending on your position and the position of the satellites. This is again more than enough, because to identify your position you only need, theoretically speaking, again, like 3 satellites, and a 4th one if you also want to know exactly your altitude, your elevation, what is your height above the medium sea level. So basically I'm not going to go into too much mathematics, keep it very simple. So basically your position on this sphere, basically the Earth is like, okay, it's not a perfect sphere, but basically on this ball your position on this surface will be uniquely identified by by your relative position towards 3 satellites. So every satellite will be transmitting data to your GPS receiver. That will allow you to determine your relative position from that satellite. And knowing your relative position to 3 points, just like they do with these cell towers, allows you to triangulate your position. So the position will be described uniquely as the latitude, the longitude, and the altitude. The altitude is simple, right? That's your height above the sea level which corresponds to 0 meter. The latitude and the longitude we'll see in a minute. I got a nice picture from Google Earth, voila. So if you look at the entire globe, the Earth is actually divided, if you go like horizontally across the equator here, the entire Earth will be divided in, like you know from the maths class, 360 degrees, right? So one circle is 360 degrees. Instead of 360 degrees, they actually, the 0 degree will be kind of going through London here. This is called the Greenwich Meridian. So where this, from the North Pole through London, that arc hits the equator, that's like 0 degrees. From the 0 degrees, instead of going like 360 degrees, they have made it simple. They have said you can either go 180 degrees to the east or 180 degrees to the west, right? So if I'm moving on this equator somewhere, if I'm below London, I will be at 0 degrees. If I come to this, here I'm at, here I'm at 70 degrees east. So if I'm moving actually from the North Pole all the way till this line, if I stay on this line, I will always be at a position at a longitude, long means along the equator, at a longitude of 70 degree east. If I go to here, it's 90 degrees. So basically every line here coming will be further 10 degrees east. So if I would go from London to the other side, to the US, I would be going west, 10 degrees west, 20 degrees west, etc. So this basically gives my unique location along one of these longitude, the length lines. Now to know my vertical position, they have done the same thing. From the equator onwards, equator corresponds to 0 degrees. Latitude means, going up and down. So I can go towards the North Pole, which means I can go 10 degrees north, 20 degrees north, 30 degrees north, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and on the North Pole I will be at 90 degrees. Right, so your vertical position will be determined somewhere between 90 degrees north to 90 degrees south if you are below the equator. So can somebody tell me, for example, approximately Chennai, what is the unique location of Chennai in terms of longitude and latitude? So we're at where is the east here? Here you have east 70, east 90. So Chennai will actually be somewhere around 79 degrees east. So that gives my horizontal position. Now what is my vertical position of Chennai? So it's between 10 and between 20. So it's around 12 to 13, yeah, somewhere. Okay, so that again we can find out on, with some of these tools. If you have a map, you can easily click on your location. I could actually, okay, it's time to stop the 9th slide of the recording.